4 different decks going up against each other yet again. Which is, it's good. Variety is the spice of life in terms of this final here, friends.
Yeah, and I want to just talk about the matchups that we saw. When Glogowski did play against this same configuration of Esper control and mono white aggro, I think despite the fact that he lost 2-0 to Andre Mangucci, that is still the lineup that he wants to play against. Yeah. He wants his mono blue tempo deck to go up against the Esper control deck because the mono blue tempo deck really struggles against the hyper aggressive decks of the format. It really struggles, especially if it's on the draw. It really struggles to kind of break serve in that matchup. So what do you want to see here is a matchup of mono blue against Esper, and he wants his mono red deck to go against Savjz's mono white deck. That's
not what we're seeing though. We're seeing white weenies versus mono blue tempo, both opening hands with 2 lands and a couple of 1-drops. Merfolk Trickster, the earliest creature playable though for Canister.
And yeah, taking a look at Glogowski's hand, I haven't really seen kind of the draw that you see quite often with the mono blue deck, which is of course a 1-mana 1/1 flyer into Curious Obsession. Kind of slower start here. We have the Tricksters, we have Negate and Wizard's Retort. And those effects are off. I mean, this opening hand is pretty decent against an Esper control deck because you can flash in a creature and have counter magic and ways to protect your Trickster. But against an aggressive deck, I mean, cards like Negate aren't especially strong against the mono white aggro deck. Of course, there are a couple of targets. You can get Conclave Tribunal, you can get Legion's Landing and History of Benalia, but there are oftentimes you just won't have any targets when your opponents play a creature.
So Savjz just deliberating over that choice there. What do I want to play first? The 1/1 Hunted Witness or the 2/1 Dauntless Bodyguard? I think if he's thinking, all right, I need to out-punch my opponent. I need to be the beatdown from the get-go. So let's get that Bodyguard down and get it taken straight away. Tithe Taker here. This should resolve, and that will be quite taxing on the mono blue tempo deck.
Yeah, and Glogowski should use cast Merfolk Trickster in response to the Tithe Taker if he does want to play a spell, as if Tithe Taker resolves, you will not be able to play spells, or all spells that you cast on your opponent's turn cost 1 more. So he will not be able to play the Trickster once Tithe Taker enters the battlefield.
Also just preventing the Dauntless Bodyguard from attacking, dealing damage. And now with a Merfolk Trickster on the board, Wizard's Retort, of course, being 1 mana cheaper. Presenting the attack, and Savjz will take the trade here. Deciding maybe not. Yep. What is the best move here? Take the damage, keep the Tithe Taker up to prevent any counter spells on your side, or just try and get these Tricksters off the board?
So this is really interesting because oftentimes you are happy to trade your creature for your 2-drop for their 2-drop because you profit in that exchange because you get that 1/1 Afterlife token. However, the mono blue tempo deck likes to play everything at instant speed, so that text on Tithe Taker, making your spells cost 1 more on your opponent's turn, Savjz decided that it was worth it, in fact, to be able to have access to that ability to prevent Glogowski from maybe playing multiple spells or just taxing his mana.
Yeah. Now Savjz with the 3 1-drops in hand. This is what you want to see as the white weenie player. You want to get your board down as quick as you can. Go wide, go big, and send your opponent home if possible.
And I love this. Savjz is actually opting to go for the triple 1-mana play here of Bodyguard, Hunted Witness, Hunted Witness. Oftentimes the play pattern when you do play the mono-white aggressive deck is turn 3, if you got a History of Benalia, you run out History of Benalia. However, in this specific matchup, because you're playing against a deck with a lot of counter magic, the best way to play around these kind of expensive counter spells is to just play out cheaper cards. If your opponent uses Wizard's Retort to counter your 1-drop, you can still follow that up with the 2 Hunted Witnesses in your hand.
Because we don't often see many creatures on the blue side of the board.
Right.
So the white definitely has that advantage where they have more creatures. Oftentimes, they get bigger than the blue decks does, especially if there's no Tempest Gen on the board.
Yeah, and absolutely. And this is kind of the downside of playing the mono blue tempo deck. When you play against these aggressive strategies, your creatures all of a sudden look so much worse than the creatures that your opponents have. I mean, look at this. We're looking at a 1-mana 2/1 compared to a 2-mana 2/2 on Glogowski's side. We're looking at Tithe Taker, which does so much work here. And, you know, Glogowski is in a really tough spot now. Look at all the permanents that Savjz has put onto the battlefield here. We're looking at 5 creatures to just 1.
Setting himself up nicely here, especially if he finds a gap to Unbreakable Formation his creatures, adding that 1/1 counter in the main phase and making them, I forgot the word. Vigilant, there we go. So much magic this week, forgive me, friends. Yeah, Wizard Retort getting rid of that Hunted Witness.
And Glogowski knowing that these counterspells are not going to get a whole lot better if I sandbag it, so just choosing to run out the Wizard's Retort. But keep in mind, I mean, this Merfolk Trickster is at least keeping that Hunted Witness at bay, and also representing a trade with one of the Dauntless Bodyguards, but he has to still be afraid of the 2 cards in Savjz's hands.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so many powerful effects that he could have here. What if he has a Loxodon? You need to have counter magic for that. What if he has History of Benalia? What if he has Unbreakable Formation? There's a lot of really scary cards that it might be in Glogowski's best interest here to at least wait one more turn to give Savjz the opportunity to cast one of those spells into his counter spells.
So Glogowski now deciding, what do I want to do here? Do I play my spells? Do I get my creatures down as blockers? Or do I wait to see what comes next?
The alternative here is to just run out Surge Mare, as it serves as an excellent blocker here, because it is able to brick wall all the creatures that Savjz has on the battlefield. But if you just run the numbers and you just try to figure out exactly, kind of smell out what Savjz has in hand, you have to think that he's got one of those cards, right? The locks. I like to call them the big payoff cards in this deck. You play a ton of 1-mana cards, and you have a lot of ways to kind of punish your opponents. You have cards like the Loxodon, History of Benalia, Benalia Marshal. All those cards are the payoff cards, and you simply cannot let those cards resolve in this matchup.
Yeah, the 3 CMC cards definitely being the payoffs for the white weenie deck. So that's not what you want to see. And even the Loxodon, it's a 5-mana card, but it is, of course, that much cheaper with all these bodies on the board. You can, in essence, pay it for free.
Wait, you pay full price for Loxodon? My Loxodons often cost 0 mana, and it's usually on turn 3, so...
Yeah, those are terrifying, especially on the other side of the board when you see that Loxodon convoke, like, oh no, my face.
And now, really, Glogowski there's a lot of pressure here on him now, because does he want to play out a Trickster here just to get some of these creatures off the battlefield? He can use Merfolk Trickster, target the Tithe Taker, so that the Tithe Taker no longer has text. So if they do trade, Tithe Taker loses Afterlife. And on top of that, Glogowski now has the opportunity to cast Dive Down to save one of his creatures in the exchange. However, the window is now the window is now open here for Savjz to play either History of Benalia or Unbreakable Formation.
Perhaps thinking there's a Spell Pierce in Glogowski's hand, maybe not wanting to play the History of Benalia. Maybe losing the creatures here, it's not the end of the world. Perhaps the History of Benalia would apply additional pressure, increased pressure on Glogowski in this situation. And
Savjz now deciding whether or not he cares about dealing 2 additional points of damage or saving Tithe Taker. One of those Dauntless Bodyguards has targeted the Tithe Taker. And again, Savjz, very impressive play here, just recognizing how important Tithe Taker is in this matchup, choosing to save it, giving it indestructible this turn.
Now this is pretty big information for Savjz, seeing the dive down. Canister is tapped out.
And now we're going to see a History of Benalia from Savjz, and again, that Canister is now going to have to fight through History of Benalia, 2 Knight tokens, and of course Chapter 3, where all your Knights you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. And Blue, tough time dealing with enchantments once it resolves.
Oh yeah. So the Surge Mare on blocking duty for Canister. Ooh.
Oh wow.
That's a goodie.
That was an extremely good draw, because Glogowski drew Spell Pierce, but Savjz has mana to pay for Spell Pierce. The alternative line of play here for Savjz was playing out an Unbreakable Formation, but of course that leaves you vulnerable to Spell Pierce. Now, Savjz has an attack here with 3 creatures that allows him to flip Legion's Landing while also allowing him to play around Spell Pierce. Keep in mind, that negate, if you can see, that's 2 and a blue. It costs 1 additional mana because Tithe Taker is on the battlefield. So even going back to the previous turn where Savjz realize that Tithe Taker is one of the most important cards in this matchup, I'm going to sack my Dauntless Bodyguard, deal less points of damage, because that's going to tax your mana. And for that reason, you're seeing the payoff here for Savjz, as this Legion's Landing will resolve.
There we go, hits the board. 1/1 lifelink token, and the Hunted Witness to follow it up. We're going to see, not this turn. Next turn, we're going to see a Flip Legion's Landing with the 3rd chapter of History of Benalia going off as well.
Yeah, keep in mind that, again, the blue deck, no way to deal with enchantments, so he can just choose to wait until next turn to Flip Legion's Landing, because he doesn't have anything to do with the mana this turn. He actually doesn't even have mana to activate Adanto the First Fort, because he casts other spells this turn.
So an additional mana for Savjz. The third chapter of History of Benalia is active.
So now the only thing Savjz is deciding here is whether or not he wants to run out an unbreakable formation before attacking. If he does, it will get spell pierced. Yeah. Keep in mind, Surge Mare's activated ability also can't be used when Tide Taker is on the battlefield. Surge Mare, of course, costing 1 in a blue to give it +2/-2 until end of turn. But with that Tide Taker on the battlefield, costs 3 mana.
Bit of a pesky card, isn't it?
Yeah, this card, I mean, I've had so many games where my opponent has a Tide Taker in play, and I try to activate Adanto the First Fort at the end of their turn, because that's what you do.
Oh yeah, I've done that too.
And I'm like, why can't I do this? This is a bug. Oh no, you just got to read the card. Tide Taker's on the battlefield.
Yeah, I've done that many times as well, and I'm like, oh, the game's broken. No, it's not. You just didn't RTFC. Silly. So, Savjz deciding now, do I want to use this unbreakable formation? Is it worth the risk? Let's present my biggest threats and my creatures that can replace themselves in the Hunted Witness. And that guy too.
And Savjz,
go on, little lifelinker, go.
Deciding whether or not he wants to attack with the Tide Taker. I don't think the Tide Taker is as important anymore. Because he did pretty much deploy all the threats that he could, but he's looking like he wants to just still keep it at bay, tax Glogowski's mana here, and now Legion's Landing has flipped. So now, even if Savjz draws a couple of lands in a row here, he still has a mana sink here in Adanto the First Fort. He can still continue to pump out 1/1 tokens. Meanwhile, Glogowski doesn't really have a lot of pressure on the battlefield.
But Tempest General for top there for Canister might cause a little bit of hesitation for Savjz in the next attack phase.
Yeah, and I think at this point...
But if Canister plays it, he doesn't have access to any of his counter spells.
Absolutely. So I think he's forced to play the Tempest Gen here because he's so behind on board with that Adanto the First Fort. His win condition is to try to turn the game around with Tempest Gen. But of course, we know Savjz has unbreakable formation here. What he can do now is make a token at the end of turn, main phase that unbreakable formation, put +1/+1 counters on the entire team, give them indestructible, give them vigilance, and have not a care in the world.
Nope. It's just a case of, all right, you guys will get a +1/+1, you're all vigilant, go face.
And look at this.
Oh, look at that board. That's what you want to see as the white weenie player, 100%.
An attack for 15. And again, all these creatures have indestructible. This is what we like to call a free attack.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter how your opponents block, your creatures are going to be safe.
You know what would have been the cherry on top? As if you had drawn the Loxodon on the end step there.
Yeah, a Loxodon would be good, or any other creature for that matter, because he would be able to play the creature and also get the counters onto it.
Yeah. So Canister now deciding how to block in the situation. A lot of his creatures are tougher than the damage that they will be dealt, so his blockers will stay up. Not facing lethal just yet. He needs to find some more bodies on the board.
And that is not going to do it. If you look at the board now, Glogowski has 3 creatures to block with, and there's 6 attackers on Savjz's side. So if Savjz attacks with all of his creatures, that will be a lethal attack. Yes. Now, there's maybe one card that he's really going to be concerned about here, potentially a Merfolk Trickster. Yeah. But he will know before attacking whether or not Glogowski has a Merfolk Trickster, because it would be in his best interest to play the Trickster prior to attacks to tap down one of Savjz's creatures. So this is a lethal attack, and Savjz should take down the first game. And you see that fist bump from Savjz. It must feel great getting the good matchup and winning that first game.
GG's to Savjz. First game under the belt.
And now we're going to go to, of course, the other end of the spectrum here. We have Savjz with Esper control going up against Glogowski's mono-red aggro.
Now in this matchup, we have seen this several times this week. It can go either way. It just purely depends on how fast the red deck can burn your face.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, just kind of looking at how this matchup plays out, we have seen it go both ways, because I think both of these decks are the types of decks that don't necessarily crush any of the decks in the format. They're both just considered very powerful decks. Yeah. And oftentimes these are decks that have maybe, you know, slightly above 50% win rate against all the decks in the field. So I think it's going to be close. We've seen the mono-red aggro deck get off to fast starts. Of course, the Esper control deck sometimes can get clunky draws and stumble. Yeah. We've seen mono-red aggro also looking like they can't possibly win the game, and then top decking an experimental frenzy to play 6 or 7 spells in a row to come back. So yeah, I think this can definitely go both ways. But of course, Savjz with 4 copies of Moment of Craving, which will really help shore up this mono-red aggro matchup.
Indeed, the life gain will be a very important factor in this matchup. As we can see, Glogowski has whipped out the Happy Hat. Is that going to give him a little bit of an extra edge in this match, do you think, Paul?
Well, I mean, if there's a time to bring out the Happy Hat, this is the time. Your back is against the wall. You are down a game. This is the biggest Magic tournament that we've ever had in terms of prizes. First place, $250,000. If you're going to use a one-time to get there, to get the best possible string of draws, this is it.
All right, taking a look at a mulligan here from Glogowski. One-lander into another one-lander. This one may be looking a little bit better with a few more creatures in hand. And on Savjz's side, we've got the 3 lands, all colors accessible, and a turn 2 Thought Erasure, which is a big deal for this Esper control match.
Yeah, Thought Erasure is strong, but taking a look at
×2.
Savjz's mana, he does have a bunch of shock lands in hand, so he's going to be taking damage, and that you're just only helping the mono-red aggro's game plan here.
But taking a peek into Glogowski's hand and getting rid of the biggest threats at the moment, which is, of course, the Viashina Pyromancer that can make the Wizard's Lightning cost only 1 red mana.
Right, but Savjz really wants to absorb all those spells with incidental life gain, because that makes it that much harder for the mono-red deck to kind of assemble enough burn spells for the win.
Also wants to find those moments of craving, possibly gain as much life back as he can. Gonna get rid of the Wizard's Lightning or the Shock here? Wizard's Lightning, yeah. Oh, Vraska's Contempt on top.
Despite not having the ability to cast the Wizard's Lightning, I think you just want to go for the spell that just deals the most raw damage.
Yeah.
Savjz is still at a fairly comfortable 13 life. Of course, he still needs to find an answer to the Firebrand, wants to find some ways to gain life, but you still currently just want to make sure you take the card that deals the most damage.
So Glogowski drawing the Experimental Frenzy, but no 3rd land, so that will not be hitting the board anytime soon.
Yeah, and things are a little bit awkward here for Savjz. I mean, he does have Kaya's Wrath. He had a couple of Thought Erasures, but his mana base, he's not drawing any of the Isolated Chapels or Glacial Fortresses. All he's been doing is drawing those shock lands, which are dealing. I mean, it's already dealt 4 points of damage to him throughout the course of the game. That's 2 shocks.
He's on 10. That's a little sketchy, a little uneasing there for Savjz. He's got to be careful with his life total here.
Yeah, and now even Savjz is considering what he wants to do here. Does he want to not take a point of damage from the Fanatical Firebrand? He could maybe, for example, go for Kaya's Wrath, but he also just wants to try to stabilize and cast the Fairy. So it looks like he's passing.
I think we'll see a Chemist's Insight on Canister's end step, just to try and find some of those life gain sources in his library.
Oh, and a light up the stage off the top for Glogowski. That's a huge draw. He needs mana. Deal. He needs lands to get that Experimental Frenzy on the battlefield. Also, he's just digging for burn spells. That was a big, big draw.
He's got 5 points of damage in his hand at the moment.
Things are getting dicey.
Yikes. Ooh-wee. This is close. All right, Chemist's Insight. What can you find? Savjz needs to find life gain.
Glogowski has a shock that he's likely going to use anyways, deciding whether or not he wants to fire it off, and he does. So Savjz now at 2 life. Fanatical Firebrand, you can still sacrifice it to deal 1 damage. And Savjz needs to find a moment of craving here.
All right, so Fairy's going to hit the board, possibly putting the Fanatical Firebrand. No. Drawing a card?
I think you have a better chance of winning if you probably draw a card here. That allows you to find one of your 2 Moment of Cravings. Now, Glogowski has so many cards he can draw at this point. If he draws a land, he can slam Experimental Frenzy on the battlefield. And of course, almost his entire deck is burn spells. If the Fanatical Firebrand lives, that's 1 point of damage no matter what. So even a Goblin Chain Whirler or another Fanatical Firebrand will do it. Even a card like Gitu Lava Runner would do it. So his entire deck.
So now he's just hoping that he doesn't draw burn spells off the top.
There we go. Fingers crossed.
Crossing
Lucky
his
hat.
fingers. No. Experimental Frenzy is going to stall it for just a little bit. Let's take a look. Oh, there's a shock on top of his library, so now he needs to set.
But that's a Mortify off the top for Savjz. He has the answer for the Experimental Frenzy, but he still needs to dodge a burn spell off the top of Glogowski's deck. Glogowski can still draw anything that deals 2 or more damage to win this game.
He's got it on top. He's got it on top.
Fingers crossed. What's on top here for Glogowski?
It's a shock.
It's a shock.
It's a shock.
It's a shock. We're going to see a game 3.
Savjz's face says it all. It's like, oh.
Does you want to play it? I mean, you still
got?
have to be afraid of counterspells.
Yep.
Is
Absorb
Glogowski going to play it slow here? I think he's going to try to wait for Savjz to play that Chemister's Insight. Because if he does, then he can shock and response, and he doesn't have to be worried about a counterspell.
Correct. Here we go. Let's see. In response, a shock to the face of Savjz.
Oh, look at
and
him.
A sigh of relief from Piotr Glogowski, the happy hat, doing the good work there.
Oh yeah, and
the shock did nothing.
Yeah.
It's all the hat, I'm telling you.
that was a bit dicey. I mean,
oh, that was close.
Because Glogowski, not only did he mulligan to 6, he kept the one lander and was able to find that land on top. But Savjz just not drawing any of his ways to gain life. I mean, he's got the absorbs, he's got Moment of Craving, but was just unable to find them. And the awkward mana draw of just drawing all shock lands made it so that he just made it easier for his opponent to burn him out, basically.
That was a bit of a rough draw there from Savjz, but very, very well done from Glogowski. We are into game 3 now. If you are both players, what deck do you want to bring into this final battle?
So if I'm Savjz, it's rough, right? If you play the mono white aggro deck, you might go up against the mono red aggro deck.
Yep.
And after I heard what Manguchi said, I'm not even sure who's actually favored there. But going in, I thought that the mono red aggro deck was slightly favored.
Yep.
However, if you play the Esper control deck, you might run up against Glogowski's mono blue tempo deck. But then if you're on Glogowski's side, if you play mono blue tempo, mono white aggro is so hard. It's so tough of a matchup. I don't know if you can afford to submit mono blue tempo. And I talked about how mono red has basically game against any deck in the format. And if that's what you truly feel, then I think it makes a lot of sense for Glogowski to actually go with mono red aggro here in game 3.
All right, taking a look at the opening hands. You are correct, Paul. Mono red versus the Esper control list. We've seen this matchup so much this week. Let's see how this one plays out. Gitu Lava Runner hits the board first for Canister. Savjz getting his mana down. Turn 2 Thought Erasure is a possibility. He's going to see a whole hand of, that's not what I want to see on the board at all.
No, I think he's just going to go for a Moment of Craving here, trying to minimize as much damage as possible. You don't want your opponent to get Spectacles with Light Up the Stage. Moment of Craving generally doesn't have that many better targets anyways. And then he can follow up Thought Erasure on a following turn, because the cards that he's really concerned about would be cards like, you know, Goblin Chain Whirler, Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah, Light Up the Stage as well, just additional land draw. Not small, but it is potentially land draw, yes, but card draw for Canister. Choosing to get rid of the card draw card for Canister.
Glogowski really wanting to draw land number 3 there for Goblin Chain Whirler, but a Vivishino Pyromancer will also do. Keep in mind, Savjz does not play Cry of the Carnarium main deck, so that is not a card that he can top deck to sweep this board.
Does have access to the Vraska's Contempt when needed, but Search for Azcanta going to hit the board here.
Yeah, and interesting, he chooses to go for Search for Azcanta there instead of playing an untapped land and casting a Vraska's Contempt on one of the creatures. So he's going to take additional damage here.
Canister following up the attack with a Skewer the Critics, 3 damage to the face for just the 1 mana due to the Spectacle cost. And he's still got the Lightning Strike and the Shock available to him if he wants to.
Yeah, and Canister just deciding whether or not he wants to fire off the Lightning Strike, opting to keep it.
Absorb is a good card here for Savjz. Able just to counteract anything that might threaten that life total from Savjz.
Yeah, so now it's pretty tricky when you're playing the burn deck. It's like, okay, if I get absorbed here, it sets me so far back. Do I want to fire off this removal spell? If you think it's likely that your opponent has absorbed and you still want to make them cast it, it might even be possible to lead out with Shock instead of Lightning Strike, even though it's a little more mana inefficient.
Yeah. So the Vivishino Pyromancers swinging in for the attack, and Vraska's Contempt will get rid of one of them, exiling and gaining 2 life for Savjz.
And at this point, Glogowski has to think, well, you know what? If Savjz had a sweeper there, there's a pretty good chance he would have run it out that turn. So as a result, I'm going to run out this Goblin Chain Whirler and make you have the Wrath.
Yes. The Wrath, of course, not in the hand at the moment, but there's a Mastermind's Acquisition. Is that just what you want to see right now?
That is just far too slow.
Yeah.
He wants to find a Kaya's Wrath, and he does.
There it is.
Off the top, Kaya's Wrath for Savjz. Look at that sigh of relief.
That relief.
He needed to find a way to deal with both of those creatures. Now, keep in mind, he's still not alive. He
needs to.
If Glogowski found another 3-mana burn spell, he would have had lethal. But Savjz still alive in this game. A huge, huge top deck from Savjz there with the Kaya's Wrath.
All right, Lightning Strike in the hand of Glogowski now.
He's like, do I want to fire this off now? Do I want to play around Absorb? He's not, and decides against it.
Drowned Catacomb on the top of the library. Do we need it? That's what Savjz is thinking to himself.
Interesting, he's going for the land here. Does he want to play a second Search for Azcanta to continue to put cards in his graveyard, or does he just want to run out Teferi Hero of Dominaria? If he does, he's in a really dicey spot. He will not have the mana to absorb.
That is risky.
And now, again, fingers crossed potentially here. Glogowski basically has nearly half of his deck, maybe more than half of his deck. He's only playing 18 lands to draw here to get this win. And Savjz going for the minus on Teferi. So Glogowski has Lightning Strike.
Yep.
He has Lightning Strike available. He can choose to go Lightning Strike, your face, get you down to 2. So anything I draw, any burn spell that deals 2 or more damage off the top will be lethal.
Lightning Strike.
All right, here we go. Top deck.
Let's see.
Are we going to find a burn spell off the top for Glogowski?
Let's light up the stage.
That could be anything. 2 more cards.
It's a Fanatical Firebrand.
Oh, it's not enough. It's not enough. And because of that, because he doesn't have lethal here, I think he's going to want to use this Fanatical Firebrand to get Teferi off the battlefield here.
Yeah. Shake of the head there from Glogowski.
Super close game. Savjz is so close to being able to turn around this game. He really wants to be able to cast this Absorb.
Fanatical Firebrand going after Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. You don't want the extra card draw off of that Planeswalker.
Absolutely.
Another Absorb.
But at this point, Savjz needs to find a removal spell. He wants a moment of craving for that Firebrand, and he already has an Absorb in hand, so it looks like he's going to want to put the Absorb in graveyard and flip Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
Godless Shrine.
Probably putting that one into play tapped.
Probably. You know, you never know. Checking his mana base here, making sure that the Absorb stays up.
Oh, and this is so, so close.
Oh,
all right, so the card that Glogowski is concerned about here is Absorb.
Yeah.
If he runs out any one of his creatures, it will get absorbed.
Yes.
And that will bring Savjz's life total back up to 5, so he will not have lethal.
It's consideration here now for Glogowski. Do I play this and risk it for the biscuit, or do I just
And Savjz has to absorb here. He has to absorb. He's going to go to 5. However, the Fanatical Firebrand will get Savjz down to 4. Goblin Chain Whirler will be cast, and Savjz will be going down to 3, meaning he will need to find an answer for Goblin Chain Whirler next turn, because this is a lethal attack next turn. Not only that, he has to avoid burn spells off the top from Glogowski's deck. This is truly what this mono-red deck tries to do, is put maximum pressure on your opponent's life total.
Kaya, is this a keep or a bin?
Ooh, man. So
tough.
he can choose to keep, and he actually lives. He survives this attack. If he plays a Kaya pluses, he will go up to 5 life. Chain Whirler Firebrand is 4 damage. That means he's going to go down to 1. However, that means that if Glogowski draws any burn spell, any haste creature, Glogowski will be able to lock up a slot into the finals of the Mythic Invitational.
Tough decision here for Savjz. Do I go for the life gain, or do I hope something better is just beneath Kaya or of Usurper?
I guess Kaya's Wrath maybe is something that he's looking for here. This is a huge decision.
All right, what is it? Vraska's
Contempt. Vraska's Contempt, that's a huge draw.
That is a great draw for him.
That is a huge draw, because now he has an answer. He has a removal spell for Goblin Chain Whirler. This is now going to put him to a safe 5 life, and that's extremely important because all the burn in the mono-red deck deals damage in chunks of 3 damage. So now he's going up to 5. He's going to take a hit from the Firebrand, but even a Lightning Strike off the top won't do it for Glogowski.
Could see the relief on Savjz's face there, and a little bit of a, oh gosh.
Oh my goodness, and that is a landed. That's exactly what Savjz needs. Look at him, that sigh.
Ooh.
He's so thrilled here. He's like, okay, this is the point. This is potentially the turning point. I now have the chance. I might be able to come back from this. I need to find an Absorb. I need to find a removal spell, maybe a Teferi, but this is it.
Yep. We've seen so often when the Esper control deck just stabilizes with not a whole bunch of life left. Savjz now going to dig through his library to find possibly the moment of craving. he just needs to find something that just helps him get a little bit more. Oh, here we go.
And that's a Wizard's Lightning off the top. So if Savjz actually activates Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, he can only syncopate for 2. Glogowski has 5 mana in play. If he plays Wizard's Lightning, he can still pay for the syncopate. I was actually very curious. I wasn't sure if he wanted to actually top that syncopate because it's in his best interest to use Azcanta the Sunken Ruin to find answers. On top of that, I think you want to draw anything else. Even a removal spell for the Firebrand means that you're safe from a 3 damage burn spell off the top. So I wasn't sure about wanting to keep that syncopate on top in this matchup. Because at this point, this is what the red deck can do.
Yep.
You force the action. You can just wait. You just attack, let your opponent flinch, and then go for the kill.
Let's see now how this plays out, friends. It is getting super, super close. In this matchup, Savjz needs to find a way to stay alive.
Oh, and look at this. Glogowski doesn't even attack. Just passing, making sure that the Fanatical Firebrand is a guaranteed source of damage here, because if Savjz activated Azcanta the Sunken Ruin and found a moment of craving in response to that attack,
he loses that 1 point of damage.
Exactly.
To the face.
And now this is super close. If Savjz chooses to activate Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, he will lose this game. All Glogowski needs to do here is cast Wizard's Lightning and activate it. And he doesn't use it. He doesn't use it. Choosing wisely here to play around a potential burst spell from Glogowski. Wow, that is an insane. That's a super heads-up play, because he's thinking to himself, why did I not?
Look at that face. Look at that.
Oh my goodness. Look at that. He's like, oh my God. He's getting the payoff here, the reward for not activating Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. This is ridiculous.
Wow. I'm freaking out here. I don't know how these players must feel. I have nothing on the line, and they have it all, friends.
Right.
They are playing for a spot in the finals.
And that's a moment of craving.
There's the moment of craving for Savjz. Ooh-wee.
Oh, this is tough.
This is getting interesting, friends.
Yeah, right.
Happy hat fell off. That's what happened. That's what went wrong.
Got to put the hat on. This is so extremely close. Savjz, every single turn, so close to coming back here, because, of course, he has that continuous source of card advantage in Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. He just needs to survive some burn spells. He needs to be above 3 life so that he can start getting his card draw engine going.
But the thing with Moments of Craving, if he plays this on the Firebrand, it can sack in response. He doesn't get the life back, correct?
Exactly, so he can't even cast it. So Glogowski, at this point, he can still draw a 3 damage burn spell here for the kill.
Oh, that's a mountain there. That's not going to do it, Paul.
Oh, no, it definitely will not. And Glogowski deciding whether or not he wants to play this mountain to bluff a burn spell. Because if you keep that... So the upside of playing the mountain is if you top deck an Experimental Frenzy, you can play lands and cast more spells. But on the flip side, if you keep the land in hand, you might make Savjz play differently. For example, the turn previously, he didn't activate Azcanta the Sunken Ruin to keep up Syncopate.
Oh, very, very good play there from Savjz.
Both
players just dancing around each other so delicately. It could still go either player's way.
Absolutely. And now Savjz, deciding whether or not he just wants to use his mana this turn. If he uses the Moment of Craving, sure, he won't be able to gain the life, but it'll be at 3 life. That opens him up to being able to cast Search for Azcanta and find something like an Absorb and keep that up.
Yeah. Just for any of those pesky 3 damage spells that Canister has in abundance. So Savjz pushing here. I want to get rid of this Fanatical Firebrand. In response, sacks himself and hits Savjz in the face for 3.
Right. Savjz needing counter magic here. That's what he wants.
That won't do it.
And given that he drew Kaya's Wrath, he should main phase Azcanta. I love this. You need to main phase Azcanta the Sunken Ruin because you want to draw Absorb. That's going to make you turn the game around.
But finding Moment of Craving instead, this will not help him against any instant speed burn spell.
Right, and with Azcanta the Sunken Ruin going off every turn, and now Glogowski knowing he has moment, he needs to draw a 3 damage burn spell. He cannot play that Gitu Lava Runner. He knows Savjz has Moment of Craving in hand.
Yeah.
The only thing Glogowski is now playing to is making sure he finds a 3 damage burn spell. Skewer the Critics, Lightning Strike, Wizard's Lightning. Those are the cards that he's looking for now.
So he's just sitting there praying, saying, please, please find me my burn spells. I cannot play my creatures. If I do, Savjz stabilizes even further.
And that's
There's
an
the
absorb.
Absorb.
That's an Absorb, and that's also a Kaya, another way to gain life over time. Wow, Savjz is slowly clawing back into this game. He has multiple ways to gain life. If Glogowski plays a creature, he'll be able to gain the life off Moment of Craving. If he plays a spell, he can have access to the Absorb. What's he going to take?
He's picked Kaya, Orzhov Usurper, and he's going to start digging in the graveyard of Glogowski. chomping all those creatures and gaining life at the same time.
But keep in mind,
Yeah.
he now only has access to 1 mana. Glogowski can still draw a 3 damage burn spell here for lethal because he does not. Savjz does not have mana for Moment of Craving. So if Glogowski draws a 3 damage burn spell, that's
He
it.
does.
That's lethal. That's lethal. Glogowski top deck the win, and he needs to go for it here. If he plays the Gitu Lava Runner, that's 2 damage, Lightning Strike 3 damage, and that should be the final 5 points of damage for lethal for Glogowski.
Here we go. Here we go.
What a game!
What a game. Congratulations,
Oh my goodness.
Glogowski. Your second finalist, ladies and gentlemen. What a crazy game that was.
And I still just want to point out how amazingly Savjz played. He had the opportunity to activate Esper the Sunken Ruin,
Yeah.
but he smelled something there. He said, oh my God,
Hold on a minute. Something
why did you not attack with